Hi, welcome to Life After Everything. This is an 18 plus podcast due to the language and material being discussed and has the potential to trigger anyone in the areas of abuse, addiction, death, murder, cartel, mob, LGBTQ plus, or religion. So if you have sensitivities in any of these areas, just be aware and step away if you need to. We care about you. We want you all to come on this journey with us, but we also want you to take care of yourselves and make sure that if you need to step away, whether that's just for a few minutes or permanently, that you do that and do what's good best for you. Hi, my name is Tam Gentry, and I am a Gen X mom of a teen with ADHD whose navigation of my husband's gender transition left me deconstructing my faith and rising from the ashes of my life. This podcast is where I unpack identity, relationships, healing, and what it actually looks like to rebuild your life when the script you were given no longer fits. And Tiffany, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, I am Tiffany, and excited for a disclaimer. We want to provide you guys with an opening. My name is Tiffany Hanna, and I'm your co-host. This space was created for real conversations, real stories, and real healing. Life doesn't always go the way we planned. Sometimes it breaks us, humbles us, and forces us to rebuild from the ground up. This podcast is about what happens after loss, after addiction, after trauma, heartbreak, after everything. Here we talk about grief, recovery, faith, resilience, motherhood, survival, redemption. You'll hear stories that remind you that your crazy is not that crazy and that you are not alone. That part, that part.
That makes me
Ever felt like
chuckle.
life knocked the wind out of you, but you still got back up? This podcast is for you. So take a deep breath, settle in, and welcome to Life After Everything.
Yes, yes. Thank you all for coming and spending your time with us because we know that time is valuable and in such a busy world that we live in, that's a really big deal. So we appreciate each of you.
We so appreciate you guys so much, and we hope that you guys are enjoying this journey with us. And this is a judgment-free zone. And so today it's you, Tam. So I've got some questions for you. Are you
Oh,
ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so we ended yesterday, and we were talking about you being Ava's shadow. Like, so can you go into that just a little bit? Like what does that mean for you? Like being his shadow, being the person that he made you be. Like, what does that look like?
Sure. When I married Avon, I talked about this, touched on this a little bit yesterday in our last recording, but I was kind of unhealthy in some ways, and I had already been through two failed marriages, and we can go into those later, but I didn't want to do it again. Like I wanted to make sure that I was going to be successful. I never wanted to get divorced again. I never wanted to be in another bad marriage. I never wanted to have, stuff going down that wasn't cool. And so when we first got together, um, he had a need for me to be softer, in my approach to him, or really pointed out things that often when he first pointed out something, it would really piss me off. I would get so
Yeah.
mad at him, and then I would take a second and we had some rules that we entered into our marriage with, and one of them
So
was
let's back up for a second. So when
okay.
you mean softer, like what do you mean? Do you mean like your physical touch with him, your delivery, your voice, like your mannerisms?
He used the term softer, but I think he was really talking about my gentleness with which I approached him with things. I grew up mostly in the Midwest and like graduated high school in the Chicago area,
Right.
Northwest Indiana, about an hour out of Chicago. And so I spent a lot of time living in a Midwest to kind of almost abrupt culture where when you're speaking, it's more abrupt. You clip your words more. And, some of those things translate different to someone who grew up in Georgia.
Okay,
So,
girl.
and so when you're used to that Southern hospitality, Southern drawl, Southern mentalities, surrounding what is what, and you have someone who comes in from the city who is kind of
More abrupt.
clipped and more abrupt, the vibe of that was hitting him wrong. And
Okay.
so immediately straight out of the gate, he was, I can't really blame him for having a need, but his need translated into him
Something was
trying
wrong
to
with you.
shift my
Right.
behavior so that it made him more comfortable, and that started a whole tirade of life systematic dismantling of who I was as an individual. And the problem that I had personally was that because I was so desperate to have my marriage work, and because I started seeing problems pretty early on with some of this stuff, and there were other things too that I can go into, but that set the stage for me kind of crying out to God. I ended up in a place where I was like, well, damn it, I don't want to get divorced again. I don't want to do that again. I know I'm supposed to be here, so I got to try to make this work. So I started bending. I started yielding. I started trying to morph myself to fit his more perfect wife scenario so I could be that good little wife. And I was so steeped in Christianity and extremely conservative, you
Mainstream
know,
Christianity. Yeah.
well, almost more fringe. We grew up on the Pentecostal side of the world,
Okay.
and so we were both very hyper conservative. Our thoughts about marriage and family and everything fell into those categories. We'd both been indoctrinated very, very well, and so it was like, and you wouldn't know this about him because I don't think I've ever told you this, but he had his first French kiss with me. He was completely innocent when I met him, and he was
Okay,
25
girl.
years old when he kissed me for the
You
first
thought
time.
he was innocent till you met him, till you
Well,
guys
I
got
mean,
together.
as far as physical
Okay,
intimacy, he
I
he
have to ask.
absolutely was.
I have to ask you the $1,000,000 question because anybody that's been listening to this podcast is at the same stage we're at right now, so they know that your nightgown that you got when you were married, like it
Yeah.
was ripped. So
Yes.
all that innocence in your head that you're building up for this person, um, and then you're changing, you're morphing, you're becoming softer, like what he needs you to be. Tell me what that blow was like when you realized, okay, there's another element here, and this isn't real innocent.
I didn't see it as a lack of innocence. I
Okay.
saw it as something else, whether that was demonic or it was mental. And I personally didn't really think it was demonic. I personally thought that it was probably more out of wounding, like he had been sexually abused as a young child and just didn't remember, or something like that. I thought there was some hook there that
Kind
made
of trauma.
this a trauma response. I was thinking this was a trauma response, and that was my primary um, mental state related to it, because I knew he'd been crying out to God for years and years, even before we were together. And after we got together, we both cried out to God, and it was like, God, fix this. What's going on here? What do we need to do? Kind of thing. And there was never any change. And to this day, I can say my father still lives in that space. Still today, even after all the evidence we have presented him, still lives in that space of thinking that, we just need to be seeking God about it. And
So can we talk about like what that looks like for you, like seeking those answers for God and not getting them, and what that did to you spiritually and where you're at today because of it.
it was really destructive. I was taught growing up to have faith. I have a lot of history with spiritual experiences and healings, my own personal healings that I was talked about, both inside of our family and in public speaking engagements where my dad was evangelizing in Chicago or wherever. And, I was born, I guess I could touch on this. I was born with a hole between my right and left ventricle in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first 2 years of my life, I turned blue every time I cried. So I wasn't allowed to cry. And it was, I didn't really grow. I was not thriving. My mother used to say that when I was 2 years old, I looked like a 6-month-old child walking around. And because I was so tiny. And, I've never been like super tall. I've
Right,
never been.
right.
That was no exception. I was 5.5 pounds when I was born, right? So, um, I was a small baby, and I had the hole in my heart, and that was a problem for me, related to my sister and different things, but
Well, and
related to
crying is such an important part of like a baby's psyche because that's how they learn to calm themselves is
well,
by crying. And if you like very early on, that's not a tool that
I was
you
not allowed to
gain.
use it because my
Yeah,
unoxidized and oxidized blood got so mixed that I would just turn blue.
right,
So there was no way for my body to properly oxygenate. And so they had to, address whatever was going on as quickly as possible. It doesn't mean I never cried, but I was never allowed to continue crying. Like
right.
they, back when I was born in 1968, right? They did the
Yeah,
crying out method stuff back then.
yeah,
My
yeah,
sister was left to cry for hours at night until she learned to go to sleep. I mean,
yeah.
it was not okay, and it was not healthy for the human being that was in that position, because
Right,
I crying, it's our only way to communicate when we're baby,
for
truly.
sure.
We have no words. We have limited mobility. Our primary method of communication is our cries, and so we make different types of cries for different events that are happening. if we're
And
if we're wet.
even when you're older, Angelo's gotten to where, after because everyone I've lost, he's lost. And it's been so traumatic for him. I mean, he went from being a normal kid with a girlfriend to, he's not very verbal right now, but
Right.
he never cries. But like when he does cry, I know something is
And I
fixing
bet
with
I bet
him.
you know exactly what's going on with him too,
Yes,
because you've gotten so keyed into what that particular cry means, whether it's
yes.
hunger or it's fear or it's just being distraught over something or it's
Well,
whatever.
it's interesting with babies. That's very easy, but with Angelo, because he never ever cries, and he is usually pretty much a happy guy. But like when I had to take him to the hospital, if anybody that's following us on our page knows, me and Angelo were in the ER. He
Right.
cried and grabbed his head, and he would sign for my head's hurting. But for me, I don't know. Does that mean your nose hurts, your eyes hurts? Do you have a headache?
Right.
Is your
Because it wasn't precise enough.
because it's not precise enough. So with him, when he was smaller, a cry like I could pretty much pinpoint what it was coming from. But now that he's older, like that's it's even harder now for me to figure it out.
That
But go
makes so
ahead.
much sense.
I just
That makes so much
sidebarred you
sense
so hard.
because he's not crying with frequency. So you're not relating his cry to an
Right,
event with frequency. And so the nuance of that is getting lost. So that
right,
makes so much
sure,
sense. So
sure.
in my case, um, I was not, I wasn't really thriving. And when I was 2 years old, my parents, um, there was some kind of a pastoral conference or something that they went to, and there were like six pastors, and my dad was a Missouri Synod Lutheran pastor for 10 years and then left the Lutheran church after my parents received the baptism of the Holy Spirit when I was an infant, maybe, or maybe just before I was born, somewhere in that range, right around the time I was born.
Yeah.
And so when I was two, they went to this conference or something, and there were like six pastors there that were there, and they laid hands on me and they prayed for me. And As I was always told, God healed my heart and it began closing, and I was able to avoid open heart surgery because they were trying to wait to do open heart surgery because I was so tiny.
Right.
They wanted to wait until I was 3 or 4 if they could. And so that's why we had this long extended time of me not being allowed to cry and all of that, because they didn't, open heart surgery is a little bit invasive. It
Yeah,
is
just a little
not.
bit.
It's a little invasive.
Yeah.
It's not a simple procedure. And doing that on a little teeny tiny baby body has got to be tremendously difficult, both emotionally and physically for the doctors.
Well, I'm glad when they laid hands on you at work, because the only time hands have been laid on me, I've told you that story. It was not good.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
That's another
So,
segment for another day.
yeah. And so anyway, my heart started healing up. Now, my parents always told me growing up that even the cardiologist admitted that this was a miracle. And this is something that they talked about at different conferences, having dinner with people. When we had people come to the house for this reason or for that reason, or a Bible study that they had going on. They did a lot of Bible studies when I was a kid, especially when we lived in Chicago Heights. We had Bible studies at our home every Tuesday night, I think. And I was probably 3 to 6 during that window of time. And so it was just after this had all happened. And after my heart closed, well, it never did fully close, by the way. I still have a hole in my heart. There's
Wow.
yeah, I have a minute hole in my heart. I had a doctor in Atlanta, Dr. Kinahan. He did an echocardiogram on me. I was in my I guess I was probably about 30. Did an echo, and he looked at everything and he said, yeah, you still have a hole there. There's still a minute hole between your right and left ventricles. But other than pre-medicating for dental work, it really shouldn't cause you any problems. You really don't need to worry about it. But you do need to pre-medicate for dental work, because most of the time when someone has like a heart murmur, they have to pre-medicate because there's a bacteria that you can get from your mouth, and it can travel into your heart and cause an infection. His concern was not so much infection, it was stroke.
Right.
And
Right.
I thought that was interesting. So I actually take a different antibiotic than most people do for pre-medication. I don't know if that's science, that's 25-year-old or more science.
Right.
So that science might have changed, but I haven't seen him in all those years. So, and I haven't really been following everything with doctors at that level. I don't have a cardiologist or an internist in Alabama. So,
But so
maybe when I
all these spiritual things made you feel like God can fix it. God
God
can
can
fix it.
fix it.
Pray, it's gonna
God's gonna
break.
show up. God's gonna do it. Thank you for getting me back on track. my little rambling moments.
I get, I sidebar you so hard. I'm like, I'm so sorry. We just sidebar back to the subject.
No, yeah, we're gonna sidebar. And to everybody listening, I'm so sorry in advance. We are gonna bunny trail on this podcast. It's gonna
It's a
happen. It's
squirrel.
just
Look,
gonna
squirrel.
happen, and we will try to rein it in, but it's gonna
Yes.
happen.
If they could only hear our actual conversations with each other, dear God.
Oh my gosh. But that's
Oh,
what this is, right? This is a real
yes.
conversation, and these are stories I haven't even told you before. So,
Oh, I
hey.
love this show. I love them too.
so I grew up very much in that space. I had another incident when I was about 5 where I was chasing we were at a friend's home. We used to have a church service kind of in her basement in Portage, Indiana. And she had a grandson, and he was, I think, 2 years younger than I am. So I was like 5 and he was like 3, and she had an organ. And then, how you can have those kitchens where there's openings on both sides of a wall. She had that type of setup. And on the back side of that kitchen was her organ and, maybe a chair or something, and the piano bench that went with the organ. And I was chasing John. We called him John back then. He's actually not with us anymore, but I was chasing him around in circles. We're giggling, we're laughing, we're having a great old time until I tripped and I hit my eye on the corner of that piano bench. And it split my eye open at my eyebrow, and they got a washcloth and they prayed for me, and they're like, oh, look, it's closing from the inside out. And, here's yet another thing that I was brought up believing was very much a God healing in that moment. Then there were lots of those stories. They weren't like one, two, and they weren't all pertaining to me, but there was story after story after story after story after story. Right. And it did not matter that I looked at things at times and went, that's kind of suspicious. I'm not really buying that, because I was being indoctrinated at such a depth.
Yeah, you're being conditioned.
I was being so completely conditioned to believe. So when I got into the situation with Aben, I was like, God can fix this. We're just going to trust God. God can fix this. And God never fixed it. God never fixed it. And it just continued to be a thing. But God did keep giving me peace when I was freaking out. And so I'm like, okay, fine. We're just going to keep walking this out, because I'm already married. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just going to have to walk this thing out and see where it takes me, and deal with my pain and deal with, whatever. And so, pain and I have been old friends for a very long time.
Yes, girl, same. There's a book C.S. Lewis wrote called The Problem with Pain. And I love C.S. Lewis, but I'm an avid reader.
I've read some of his stuff, but I haven't read that.
It will change your life on how you look at pain and things like that. To go back to your subject, so let me ask you a question. So where are you at today spiritually, Tam? Like, tell us where you're at. Like, what are your beliefs? What do you believe? Do you feel like you believe what you believe because you feel like God failed you, or do you feel like you are just having higher understanding? Because you and I are very different in that respect. Like, I'm very Catholic, guys. Like it, love it, whatever. It is what
Yes,
it is.
and I totally respect you and love you, and I don't hold it against you.
Thank you.
I am, so long as you don't hold my beliefs against me.
No, not at all. You know how much I love you. And
I'm
although
so
I am
completely, yeah,
Catholic,
go on. I'm
I'm
sorry.
very spiritual. Like there
That's
are
the balance that works. That's the balance that makes this work.
yeah, because
Because
you were
I'm spiritual. Yeah, at this point in time, I consider myself spiritual, not religious. I will never subscribe to organized religion ever again. I have zero interest in it and zero need for it. I have come to a place where that is not my jam. It's never going to be my jam, and I am okay with that. And it breaks my daddy's heart. And I have to be okay with that too, because my life is not his to learn to live. It's my life to live. And I have lived for other people for most of my life, and I can't do it anymore. I refuse to do it anymore.
I love that. I love that so much for you. So let me ask you another question. Let's switch gears for a second. So with all this, like you're conditioned to believe God's going to heal all these things, and then you get into this marriage and it's not what you thought it was going to be, and you're praying, you're asking God to change things for Avon, and so that he can be the husband you need him to be, and he's praying to God, and that's not working out, and then you come to this spiritual awareness. Let me ask you a question. So when Avon became Ava, and when you, because I can't even.
I'm sorry. Did you say Avon or
Did I?
Aben?
I
I
said
think you
Avon.
said Aben, and it's Aben, Aben.
Oh, thank you, Avon.
No, I
Sorry.
just wanted to make sure, because it
No,
sounded like you said Avon, and I was like, that's weird.
did I say Avon? I'm so
I
sorry.
don't know.
I'm,
No,
I'm
no.
glad you
Don't worry
corrected
about it.
me.
I mean, I haven't even, I didn't even say his name in the very first episode. So,
Okay.
um, you know, I have this thing where I use his male name when I'm speaking about him
Right.
when he was living as a man, and I use his female name when I speak about her,
Right. And I'm trying to
because
do that.
it's
So
the way that I
if
keep it
I get
straight in
that
my
mixed
head.
up, like make sure you correct me. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah, no big
when
deal.
when you are so used to looking at Aben and you're so used to seeing this man, right?
Hmm.
The When the transition happened and Aben was Ava, can you tell me what that felt like for you and where was your headspace when that happened?
When, well, I'll just go to the beginning of that. When Aben decided to transition, we'll get into how all that happened in another episode. But when Aben decided to transition, I I wanted some time. I needed some time to sit with it. I understood the biology at that point. I understood the need. I understood his desire. I understood his desperation. I had seen how depressed he had been becoming. I had seen how much he needed to make that shift and how excited about making that shift he was, and how just true the raw desperation was immense. I mean, we're not talking about this being a small thing. We're talking about this being like enough to turn in your entire fucking world upside down, risk your marriage, hurt your daughter on whatever level that hurts her because she lost her dad, right?
Right,
And
right.
so those decisions were humongous. Like, we're talking magnitude of of like major earthquakes, that rumbled through our family as a result of that decision.
And
And
so
so when
the physical side of it, of seeing Ava wearing suits and then seeing Ava wear dresses or dressed like a woman, like were you just in
she loves
shock?
wearing
Like
dresses.
I
She
know.
loves wearing dresses. Um, so
I'm sorry.
it was, yeah,
We've said before, like when I was like, okay, I've had girlfriends and my bras were always off limits. So was she like
yeah.
she was she borrowing your dresses?
Well, you know, not normally, no. Once she actually started transitioning, we're different sized people.
Okay.
Aben was 5'9".
Yeah.
I'm 5 feet tall.
Right.
So my clothes tend to be on the petite side.
Yeah.
And I generally have bought petites. There was a point in time where I gained enough weight where I was struggling a little bit with some of the petite clothing,
Right.
and kind of went to regular normal clothing, even though it would be a little extra long or whatever. And with the exception of like pants, I had to go for shorter length pants or hem them or something. But for dresses, I'll, I had dresses that fit me from before we got married. And I didn't do
Right.
a lot of dress buying after we got married because I had no need. When I was working after we got married, I went to work for Aben's parents about a month into our marriage, and they owned a wood shop. So I was in dusty, dirty environment all the time. Even though I
Right.
was working in the office, it was dusty and it was dirty, and I would work out in the shop also. And so I was wearing jeans and, t-shirts or whatever,
Right.
pullovers, stuff like that. I wasn't wearing dresses to work anymore because I wasn't working in a business office anymore. So I didn't keep buying stuff like that. I bought one dress on for our third anniversary, and it was probably the most expensive dress I've ever bought, and it was a Tadashi, and I still have it actually. It's still hanging in my closet. It actually fits me. But so I didn't have a lot of dresses that actually would fit him. So he would do things like go buy some shoes, go buy a dress, and just buy something that's kind of cheap just to have. So
Right.
that kind of, I didn't have to share a lot of that. Um, I didn't have a lot of things, even when he was thin, my dresses really weren't going to be appropriate for him.
Right.
So, um, that wasn't really a thing. But I did end up um, having some things that would, kind of get adopted, or or
Right. Does that
kind of
still
get
happen
used a
today?
little. It has happened since transition, although the two things I actually cared about that she kind of adopted, I readopted back. I talked
Right.
about my feelings, and one of them was something that really wasn't a big deal, but it was kind of special to me. I bought it to go with a coat that I had, and it was a neck wrap that I wore in New York City, and it was just something that I really loved and didn't. And she just kind of took it out of the coat closet and adopted it. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not yours,
You're
you
like,
know?
hold on, that's mine. So
Right,
what did
right. And
how did
so,
your daughter react when did you guys like have a sit down conversation? Did she see it coming? What was
oh
that
God,
like?
no, she had no clue, none. Her father was very masculine and presented very, very masculine. Um, Aben's an engineer and has a master's degree in computer science and has, made a decent career for himself. Um, she was used to her dad being strong and authoritative and commanding of attention when he'd walk into a room or whatever. I carried himself well, had an air about him. And so she was very used to that dynamic. And when we first sat down to tell her, which we did before he made the formal announcement to the family. He said my dad was living with us at the time. Actually, he had lived with us for 5 years, and we told my dad, and then we sat down with Laurie, or maybe we did it the other order. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But we sat down with Laurie and and we told her, and her initial response was, "You're pulling my leg," kind of response. Like, this isn't real. You got it. I don't think
You
she
guys
used
are
these words,
funny.
but essentially, you guys are fucking with me.
Yeah, like this isn't
She
real for the
really
moment.
didn't. She really thought we were joking. She thought we were pranking her. And we're like, no, actually, we're very serious. And she's like, what? No, 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 no. What? It blew her mind. Totally blew her mind because she'd never seen any evidence of him dressing up, never seen any evidence of him wearing makeup. Now, what she did say was, well, I did note that you never minded me painting your nails.
That's funny. That's
Because
funny.
she would like to paint his nails, and he'd be like, sure, you can paint my nails, you can paint my toenails, you can paint my fingernails, I don't mind, all this stuff.
Right.
And she wanted to put makeup on him. He's like, yeah, sure, you can put makeup on me, all of this kind of stuff. And I just always saw that as like good dad stuff. Like, normally I would just see that as good dad of daughter stuff, letting your
Right.
daughter dress you up or put makeup on you or whatever. That's
Right.
just fun. I mean, even The Rock does that stuff, right? you know,
Yeah, for sure.
but in this particular case, of course, I always had that thing in the back of my head that said, you know, okay, well, yeah, I'm glad that you're taking care of our daughter, but
Maybe
you
you like
know,
this too much. Maybe
yeah, well,
you wear that makeup a little bit too long there, bro.
yeah. Well, an 8-year-old doesn't really do a great job doing makeup or nails, so it
Right.
wasn't quite like that. But there was just always that little bit of something, like there's extra. This is a little extra. Um, and so to go to the actual question that you asked, there was a point in time after transition started where I started seeing less of my husband and more of my wife. Transition is a gradual process. When someone transitions, they have to stop the hormones that their body is naturally producing. They have to block them or do something to stop them, whether that is surgery or it's with medication or it's whatever. And then they have to replace those hormones and do a full swap. So we all have both testosterone and estrogen, male, female, it doesn't matter. We all have both of those hormones. but the degrees and the quantities that we have are very, very vastly different as
Right.
a man versus a woman. They just are. And so he had really high, pretty high testosterone. And so it took blocking that testosterone and then starting on the estrogen. When they started on the estrogen, of course, initially they start out a little low because you're doing a hard swap. Like, this is heavy duty, kick the body into chaos kind of hormonal replacement stuff. And so the medication that he took actually blocked his testosterone from absorbing, I believe is the way that it worked. And then the estrogen had an opportunity to do its job. And by doing that way, that's not how everybody does it. They do this differently for different people to
Right.
some level. But in his case, he started developing breasts relatively quickly. Within a few months, he had budding breasts. And
Wow.
and so the budding breasts, started coming in, and the face started changing, but there were so many masculine markers still, and then we went and did a hair transplant because he had a receding hairline, and had widow's peak stuff going on. And so we went and had a hair transplant done by a really good doctor that does that work. And so it changed his hairline to a female hairline as part of that process. And so as that started growing out, that made a difference. And things just started gradually shifting over time. And
Right.
it took probably, I would guess, if I were to guess, I'd say the tipping point between seeing him more versus seeing her more, just visually, it was probably tipped at 16 months, maybe 16 to
Wow.
18 months
Wow.
of being on hormone therapy, maybe a little earlier than that, but now when I look at her, I see somebody completely different. And if I go back and I look at pictures of him, it's like, who, like, that person's gone. And it's going to become more and more that way as time goes on, because there's still that's still happening. I mean, you think about puberty for a boy or a girl, and how much the body changes and how long that puberty takes. It's years. It's not overnight. you
Right.
don't you don't start developing budding breasts at 10 or 11 or 12 and then suddenly look like a grown woman at 15.
Right.
No, you don't. You might start that budding breasts at 10 or 11 or 12, but you don't look like a grown woman until you're 17, 18 years old. Most girls. Now,
Right.
that I think that has been speeding up a little bit with some of the plastics in our diets and stuff, getting some of the estrogen plastics and different things. But the bottom line is, it takes a long time. It takes a long time. So it's a very gradual process. But in
Right.
that time, there were so many things taking place, everything from dress to learning makeup to hair and figuring that out, to voice training and some of that. And that was an interesting one because Aben's voice is really deep. He had a really, really deep voice. And it was, God, it was sexy. It was one of those sexy masculine voices. And I loved his voice. He loved his voice. He didn't have any dysphoria about his voice, but his voice created a problem because there was a disconnect between what he looked like and what he sounded like.
Right.
And that was causing issues. And for him, you know, if she ever comes on the show, she can go into her stories in a lot more detail, because they're her stories to tell, not mine. But I will say that it was part of the process, um, for him becoming her, for him to figure out how she would speak, and there's a lot more that goes into it than just how deep the voice is or how bright the voice is. There's types of ways of saying things and cadences to the speech, and there's a sing-songiness to a woman's speech that men don't have. You know,
Right.
there's all kinds of things that we never think about if we just grow up it normally and naturally in that space. And um, so she is still modifying, learning, growing, shifting, changing, doing. So, but when that shift took place, when I started not being able to see my husband and all I could see was my wife, or mostly, then I would it started out where I would see glimpses of him still. I would look at her, and I would get a certain angle of view, or I'd
Yeah.
hear certain cadence to her voice or something, and I would have that moment where Aben would pop to the surface for me,
Right.
and those moments would constrict my throat. They
Okay.
would make my heart clench, because it was in those moments that I recognized or was reminded of, really more reminded of, what was being removed from my life. And
Right. And
our
how much you
marriage
love
was,
him and the loss of him.
yeah, and it's really a funny thing. You can sit in a situation and go, yeah, this marriage is not all it's cracked up to be, on this level or that level. I have these issues, I have those issues. And that absolutely does nothing to assuage the grief that you feel with the loss of that,
And
which is really interesting.
I feel that so hard because although for me, my Jamie, my husband, although I didn't lose him in the same way, I know what it's like to have a moment or see a picture or hear a voicemail or hear a video or something, and it reminds me of the person that he was, that I loved so much, that was such a good father. And then the loss of him, like I feel that so hard. Like I get it. Like I know it's different, but it's, you still lost him. He's still not there anymore. And then
Yeah, grief is grief.
grief is grief
That grief is grief.
for sure, for
And
sure.
you know what? I think that's a great segue. Can we talk about Jamie? Can we talk about how you met Jamie and how your life kind of came together with him? That might be a bigger story than you want to take time for today,
Yes,
but
I think yeah, that's I think that's a little bit bigger than today, but I will say that like we watched Wuthering Heights last night. And if you guys haven't seen that movie, it's great. And in
Mhm.
the I'll talk a little bit about when I found him, and then our next segment, I'll go into kind of my relationship with him. When my husband passed away, I found him with a needle in his arm. I had no idea. Like, I'm so can't believe I'm getting emotional. I didn't know. We were so in love, and he was the best dad I've ever met in action. And the man would have drank my bathwater. I could have rolled in mud, and he would have been like, "Baby, you're still sexy." He, yes, he was 6'4". He weighed
Ooh,
almost 300 pounds. He was huge.
big guy, big guy.
Big, beautiful guy. And I'll post
Yeah.
pictures of him so people can see it. But
Yeah,
so
I
when I
think you
found
already
him,
put a video up that included him
I
on
did.
the
I did. I
Facebook
put a
page.
video of us
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
When I found him and I called 911, they were telling me to get him turned over, just turn him over, turn him over. And he was such a big guy. So in my house in Peachtree City, he worked for CKS, not CKS. Oh gosh, that's he worked for I can't even think. It's a big packaging company. They're all over the world. I don't know why I just said CKS. Anyway, so he had a really good job, and he would work 12 hours on, and he would work 12-hour shifts. So he would work like 4 days, be off 3 days. Well, when he was working third shift, so he had his own room at my house in Peachtree City. And
Oh.
he had just worked his fourth day and had come home, and we were hanging out. And he was like, I want to hang out with you tonight. Well, Angelo got up and was like, Mommy, I want to go home. So I had two houses. I had a house in White Oak and the house in Peachtree City. And I was like, I told Jamie, I said, I'm going to put Angelo to bed. Don't go to sleep. I want to hang out with you. So I go lay down with Angelo, and me and Jamie are texting. And he's like, Babe, come get in the bed with me. And I'm like, no, your bed's gross. Like, come get in the bed with us. And he was like, I
Oh,
miss you. And I said, I missed you too. Don't let me fall asleep. Wake me up. Well, I woke up the next morning and it's like 8:30. Angelo's still there. He's not at school. And my husband took Angelo to school every single morning.
oh,
And on Fridays when the teacher would take, because Angelo has special needs, when the teachers would take the kids to do activities or things like that, Jamie would go with her so she wouldn't be alone. Like he
okay.
was
Pause for a
so,
second. Pause for a
yes,
second.
yes.
When you woke up and you saw Angelo was still in the bed at
Yeah,
8:30, did you
I
instantly panic,
I
or were
did.
you like, what the hell? Just like,
There,
what's going on with Jamie? What the fuck is
when
wrong with him today?
I said before, when there have been times in my life when the spirit inside me has said, what you do in this moment is going to define what happens from here on out. This was one of those moments.
Mm.
I got up, I turned the TV up, and I was yelling at Jamie, like, Jamie Brown, get up. Like, what are you doing? You guys slept late. Angela's got to go to school. So I turned the TV up and I went and got Angelo a drink and took him back to drink. And I closed the door behind me. And then I went into the room and I found him. Yeah, we can pick up on that next segment. We'll talk about we can talk about all that next time because it's deep and there's a
Okay.
lot to it. But
There's a lot to unpack there. Yeah,
it's a
I'm
lot to
sure.
unpack. I do remember,
Yeah.
when I watched Wuthering Heights, because after the hospital, all the things, they gave me an hour with him, like 1 hour. And for the first 10 minutes, I was trying to wake him up. He was beautiful. He looked like he
Mm.
was asleep. I was like, if you just wake up, we can go home. Like, this can just be a bad dream. Just wake up. And my sister grabbed me, Nicole, and she said, Sis, he's not waking up. Get your shit together. You've got an hour. Make it count. And I laid down beside my husband and whew, rubbed his hair and told him that I loved him and
Yeah.
that I'd be his wife forever and to stay with me. Like, in any way possible, stay with me. Like, I want to see you in the trees. I want to hear you in the birds. Like, I need to feel you. Don't leave me. Like, you can't leave me like this.
Oh
Yeah.
God, girl. I I said a few minutes ago that grief was grief, and there is truth in that. But I can say, in all honesty, I have no fucking clue what that felt like for you.
And I hope that you don't, and I hope anybody that like, ooh, hears this, we had like the Titanic love, like the Notebook love, like,
Yeah.
when I say we were so in love, and I think I, there's I battled my spirituality after this. Like, I mean, we'll talk more about it later, all the things that crashed down after it. But what I will say is, I, as angry as I am at him today, like as mad as I am, like I wouldn't trade any of it. There were times he would look at me, Tam, and he'd say, Babe, what are you thinking about? And I'd be like, I'm just taking it all in. Like, this is too good to be true. Like, I'm too happy. Life is too good. I'm just taking it all in. And
Oh, you were waiting for the shoe to drop.
I was waiting. I was waiting. I felt, there's something in me that just knew it wasn't forever. But here's what I will say. I will love him till I die. I imagine when I die, it'll be like in Titanic, when she comes down the staircase and he's waiting. In my
Yes.
brain, when I take my last breath here, like, I'll go down the staircase and he'll be waiting for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I see you, girl.
I
I
know you
see you.
do.
I wish I could give
I,
you a hug right now. We're a
it's
little
okay.
far away for that, but
We are, but we won't be. And it's okay. I've and we are gonna, if you guys are listening, thank you so much for, following along with us. Our next, I think our next one I'll open up more about like Jamie and
I think that would be a great place for us to start on the next one.
yeah. So
Yeah.
we love you guys and we thank
Yes,
you
we love you
for
guys.
listening, and remember, like, Feel the feels how you feel them. We care. We're real people. Reach out to us if you need help. If you know someone who is struggling with substance abuse, suicide, whatever, if we can't directly help you, we will help you get services. Please, please know that we care and we're real people and we're grateful for you.
Yes, thank you so much for listening today with us and coming back for more. We will be continuing this story in the next segment.